Welcome back to the third video in the series. In this video, and actually the next couple of videos, we're going to be bringing the Sprite Manager scripts over from the wiki and getting them installed and functional inside of Unity. So let's get started. To start, inside of scripts, we're going to create a new script, a C# script, and we're going to rename it. We're going to rename it Sprite Manager. And I'm going to hit enter. From here, we need to create a project for our code. So I'm going to hit Sync Visual Studio Project. I should also mention that I'm using the Windows version of Unity right now, and I'm using Visual Studio 2008 as my editor. Now, in some other videos that we're currently working on, we show you how to set up your own script that will create a code project that you can use in either Visual Studio or MonoDevelop for the iPhone version of Unity, which does not have this functionality built in. If you're using the Mac version of 2.6, I believe it does have the ability to create the project and allow you to open it up in MonoDevelopment, but the iPhone Unity right now does not. So with that being said, and after I've already synced the project, we can go ahead and open up the Sprite Manager, and it'll fire up Visual Studio, and I'll bring it in. Now it's already brought in my Sprite Manager CS file and given me some initial code. But this code is not what we need. We're going to actually end up removing all of it and replacing it. What we're going to replace it with is actually going to be the code from the Sprite Manager section of the Unify Communities wiki. And you can go to unifycommunity.com, go to their wiki, and if you're just getting here, you didn't watch the very first intro video, that's actually going to be held under scripts. Scroll down to Performance Sprite Manager, and that will bring you into this page. Basically, the first part of it is a description on how to use the scripts and all the functionality that's built into them, with a basic introductory description of how to use them. And as we scroll further down, we'll eventually get to the beginning of the very first section of code. This is the code that we need for our very first CS file. In here, you've got the credits. I highly recommend leaving the credits in there. I mean, Brady Wright did spend an awful lot of time developing this, so give the guy his due and just keep the credits in there. It's not going to hurt anything. Now, if you scroll down through here, you'll see some additional classes. The UV animation, this is what helps hold the information for controlling sprite animation based on UV offsets. And let's see, we can scroll a little bit further down. We eventually get to the Sprite Manager itself, and some of its functionality. If we scroll further down, you can see pixel space, the UV space. These are helper functions, or sorry, yeah, helper methods. And eventually we get down a little bit further. You can actually see some of how Sprite Manager works. In here, you can see where it's actually creating vertices. And let me scroll down. Basically, what Sprite Manager is doing, and the way it works is its magic is it is creating geometry on the fly for you. So when you create a sprite inside a Sprite Manager, what it's doing is it's building two triangles to make up a quad. And it has to make triangles because the iPhone version of OpenGL and OpenGL at its core supports triangles. You use two triangles to make up a quad, so you end up with 4 vertices to a quad, and that's how it gets its information. Now what happens is Sprite Manager is kind of slick in this way. At its core, what all it's doing is every time you say make a sprite, it is taking the location of the object that you've assigned to create that sprite at, It's taking its transform and creating a sprite at that location. What Sprite Manager then does is it assigns a quad and creates 4 vertices, and which make up the 2 triangles, which make up the 1 quad to represent that sprite. Then it takes all of the sprites that you've assigned, and it takes all of those triangles and assigns them into one mesh. So at the end of the day, after you've created all of those sprites, you have just a single mesh that contains all of those triangles. And then it takes your texture that you've sent to a material and assigned to the sprite manager, and takes the UVs that you tell it and maps that texture and those UVs to those quads. And I'll show you, and you'll see more of how that works in more detail when we actually start setting up the sprite manager object and assigning the materials to it, and I'll go over it. So I just wanted to go over the basics of what it is actually doing. And that, like I said, you can read further on it and actually rip the code apart if you want a better understanding. That's just a very gross overview of what's happening. Now, back in Visual Studio, we've copied the code from the wiki, and I've back here to my Sprite Manager CS file. I'm going to take all the existing code and I'm going to remove it. And I'm going to paste in the code from the Sprite Manager. So what I'm going to do is, now it's all copied in, I've removed the old code, and I'm going to hit save. And then from here, I can go back in and we can see that the new code has updated. You'll also notice down here that it seems to be broken because it can't find the a type or namespace called sprite. The reason that is because we haven't included that script into this yet. So it's looking for something that we haven't put in yet, but we will get there. And from here, we've got that. And that's pretty much all I wanted to cover in this video, was how to get this Sprite Manager in place. And the next one, we're going to bring in the next script, which is called Link Sprite Manager, and I'll go over what that is and why you want to use it in the next video. So with that, that's the end of this video, and I'll see you next time.